Everybody, good morning. My name is Alexandra Lieben. I am the president of ASTINA, which is the network, the Austria's only independent network of Austrian scientists and scholars. We operate in North America, meaning Canada, the US, and Mexico, but we also have a large chapter in Austria. It's like for all the expats, everybody who's coming back, essentially the expats, Austrians back to Austria. And so there's a lot of activity going on there as well. And we have with us today Alexander Schwarz and Ingrid Kelly from xista, which is a really important accelerator startup booster in just outside of Vienna. And I'm really excited to hear about the work you guys do and how you have been able to fund all these different startups. And Johannes Bintinger is with us. He is assistant professor at the TU Wien for theranostic chemistry. And he's the perfect person to moderate this talk today because he has been involved with two startups in this realm. It's like one as a CEO and the other one as a co-founder. So with that, I'm going to give it over to Johannes and also ask all of you to stay tuned for upcoming events that we have on Astina's side, both in person. We have something in Vienna on March 1st, but we have a few really exciting virtual talks coming up as well. So thank you very much for joining us today, and I'm turning it over to Johannes.
Yeah, thank you very much, Alexandra. It's my pleasure to host you guys. I'm very much looking forward to the presentation of Ingrid and Alexander. A very brief intro for Ingrid, who holds a PhD in molecular biology from the University of Cambridge. And she has been working at xista since 2018. Really excited to have you here and listen to your presentation. And Alexander is also with us. He has a PhD in chemistry from ETH and also conducted research at Harvard University. And now the both of you will present what xista is doing. I'm very much looking forward to hear exciting, startup companies and maybe give us an insight about the possibilities, the thinking behind xista, and maybe some of us have questions about investments in Austria. So with that short introduction, the floor is yours.
Thanks very much. Thank you, Johannes. Thank you, everybody. Thank you, Alexandra. So we're very excited to be here today. And I think part of what we want to get across to the audience today is some updated information about the Institute of Science and Technology, Austria, what's happening there in the innovation space, but also to share with you our passion, because for us, this is truly something exciting, impactful, which we see already is beginning to transform the scientific and innovation communities in Austria. So I apologize for those of you who already know ISTA well, who may have been following xista on its journey so far. But I'm going to start by taking you through a couple of slides, a bit of an update, an overview of where things are at right now and some of the initiatives that we are working on, particularly centered around the Institute itself. And then Alex is going to take over and talk a bit more about some other initiatives that are not restricted to the Institute, but are really looking at the Viennese and Austrian innovation ecosystem and how we can impact on that as a whole. So I quite like this picture. I don't know why, but this makes our campus look quite welcoming, I think.
Kann ich mich in diesem Scheiß bitte anmelden?
Viel Spaß. Thank you.
Sebastian, please mute yourself.
Sorry,
if it's
I'm can't. Sorry.
No problem. I'll continue. So this is an aerial view of the campus, kind of more or less as it is right now. And you can, maybe I'll just use the pointer here briefly. So this side of the road, and I hope you can all see this, this is the science park. And we have two buildings there. This is xista Science Park. We are actually located in this building. And on the other side of the road, we have the Institute campus itself. this being the road leading from Maria Gugging towards Klosterneuburg and on to Vienna. The historic core of ISTA was around here when we had an original psychiatric hospital, but there's been a lot of construction activity, mostly modern lab buildings all around the perimeter and then up along here, past our canteen and into the valley. And where it's still dark up there is a hive of activity and a lot of construction vehicles at the moment, because there is a new center being built down there with more lab buildings and a kind of new life around it. On the science park side, there is also plenty of capacity to expand. We have this whole hill here. The third building is about to begin construction. So the general atmosphere is there's a lot happening here, at least in terms of construction, in terms of people. There's a buzz about the place, which is quite infectious. And really, if you think about it, this is brand new stuff. 2009 is when ISTA started operations. We're barely 15 years ahead. And right now, up here and beyond here, we're currently at 89 research groups. And we're effectively doubling in size from now until 2036. The other thing that's really changed and has brought fresh air into the system has been the inauguration of still a relatively new president, Martin Hetzer. I'm sure many of you know him, as he was previously at the Salk. And he really does bring, well, I suppose a Californian flair, not a Californian accent, mind you, but a Californian flair to the Institute. We're going to see, I think, some of the measures that he's going to take that will stamp the Institute with his own labels and his own passions. This is pretty much repeating what I just said, giving you an idea of just how much we're expanding geographically and also in terms of number of scientists and staff. And for those of you who've been following, in that short space of time, there has been actually immense success on the scientific front in terms of publishing, in terms of recruiting excellence. And this is mirrored in a review from Nature, which is already somewhat old, but already back then in 2019, ISTA was placed number 3 worldwide in terms of scientific output on a size-adjusted basis, of course. There are 5 Wittgenstein Award holders at the Institute. And at the European Research Council grant level, nobody is better than ISTA. So we have a majority of professors holding ERC grants and a very high success rate among applications for ERC funding. To give you an idea, life sciences played a prominent role in the beginning, particularly in neuroscience and biology. There is quite a growth at the moment, I think, around things like astronomy and earth science, which were new additions. We have a small chemistry cluster that's growing, and these are not groups that are formally embedded in a faculty type structure. It's a much more fluid arrangement. These are informal clusters, and it grows according to who applies for positions at the faculty, with some attempt to recruit to strengthen skills and increase the breadth of research activity. And we're very fortunate to have also very strong scientific service units covering a huge range of different types of services that are of interest to all sorts of research groups. Sometimes rather expensive equipment involved in cryo-EM and so on. For our startups, this is also a very interesting option to have access to these facilities. And we have a number of startups on site, but also off site, who actually come and use these facilities, on a fee-based basis, but nevertheless accessing things that they can't easily get elsewhere. So where does xista come into this? Well, the name is quite new. We wanted to establish, if you like, an umbrella brand, which defined this overall concept of innovation. How do we impact on innovation in the broadest sense? And that has different aspects. But fundamentally, what we're trying to do is facilitate and support researchers to develop ideas that will have a huge impact on our society and who have trouble doing this alone, as we've seen in the past, not just in Austria, but pretty much everywhere. And we're trying to learn from the best, and we acknowledge that even the best are facing challenges in this space. I thought it might be interesting to share these slides and these numbers with you, more or less as to illustrate where we're at in Europe and really highlighting some of the challenges that we face in getting basic science and applied research out of the academic labs and into a commercial setting. And if you look at a successful US university, exemplified here by Harvard, you're going to have a lot of great research and you're going to have a lot of inventions being reported. And a good university is likely to have significant commercial revenue from licensing IP to other companies. And if you then look over at Europe, you get, again, really excellent research, really good scientific output. And yet, if you compare in particular the commercial revenue and the success in creating valuable companies, we're so far behind. And these are the best cases in Europe. I don't know if we were to do this for Austria, any individual institution would be minute. There are many reasons for this, and we, in our own way, are trying to address those, and maybe we can talk a little bit about that afterwards. But very clearly, one of the biggest deficits in Europe is VC funding for early stage, ambitious deep tech companies. And this is where xista Science Ventures has its niche. We are doing our little bit to help expand European funding for startup companies, but we have a lot of room to catch up. And US clearly is much further advanced on that front. So I mentioned that we have multiple things going on, multiple legs to this innovation story. I've already shown you the aerial view there where we have the science park. The science park is independent of the institute, so it's just space available for anybody, in effect, to rent labs and offices. We have a separate company in the form of the venture fund that Alex is going to talk about, which is investing in early stage spin-offs and startups that are from any institution. They have to be located in Europe, preferably in Austria, but we can't rely purely on ISTA spin-outs because the numbers are just not sufficient. So we have a whole mix of startups from different academic institutions that we're invested in through the venture fund. I want to spend a little bit of time just dwelling on the xista innovation, which is, if you like, the technology transfer office component of xista. And every university has such an office these days. And if I look around in Austria, we have some universities that are producing a lot of innovative output with very traditional tech transfer offices that spend a lot of their time and resources on capturing IP, protecting IP, and maybe attempting to out-license the IP, but not so much on the spin-out generation side of things. And that has been our major focus from the beginning, because I think, and we all strongly believe, that that's where the potential lies. If we can identify really, really promising, ideally groundbreaking innovation, creating a spin-off generates so much more impact than licensing to a big company in terms, not necessarily financially, but in terms of inspiring stories, in terms of educating others how to do the same, and so on. And in that context, I'd like to mention two things. So one is training. We focus on the mindset. We want to ensure that academic researchers are exposed to some of the concepts around entrepreneurship that they wouldn't otherwise do. We've always had a short generic program on entrepreneurship in our offering, but more recently we've been focusing on very specific training for scientists in a particular domain. Alex will talk about XBio and mention the quantum training that we've been instrumental in developing. So that's been an area with immense excitement around it. And Denise, who's on this call, was one of the alumni of XBio. I think that was the very first cohort. So she can share her experiences there too. And finally, we have a spin-off fellowship program, modeled initially on the ETH program, but to take research scientists with a promising idea and nurture them and incubate them over a year to really establish whether an idea is commercially viable. Is it something that's not only scientifically feasible, but is there a niche? Is there a market? Is the business plan going to fly? And that's something we spend an awful lot of resources on. We have a pipeline of companies or future companies coming through that now, so there's exciting times ahead. That's just a diagram to show you what the third park building will look like. But maybe in the interest of time, we can very quickly just go over some of the success stories to date in terms of spin-offs. On this slide, we have a company called Soulgate, which was a spin out of both SEM from the Austrian Academy and from ISTA in the drug development space, working on solute carriers, which spawned the second company. So Cellgate was spun out of Soulgate, and Cellgate is actually a US entity. So co-created with Curie Bio that some of you may know. Because ISTA takes an ownership stake in its spin-outs, we are present in both companies to a small extent. Neuralentech may be a more classic single institute spin-out from the autism and epilepsy lab of Professor Gaia Novarino, working on patient-derived cell models and how these can be used to address epilepsy and autism issues. And most recently from it's already now more than a year ago, Syntropic, a medical device company emerging from one of the neuroscience labs from very, very basic research, and is planning on entering clinical trials with a medical device already this year. Very, very quickly, we have companies that are not classic spin-outs, but which nevertheless have arisen through involvement of ISTA faculty and staff. Ribbon Bio, in which our fund is invested. It was created by one of the postdocs who started at ISTA in the early days. The other two mentioned here are faculty co-created companies or cases where faculty are advising startups. And in fact, Neural Magic was just announced as being acquired by Big Hat. So that's, if you like, the first exit for us. I'm going to stop here now. Alex, I hope I've left you enough time now to get through the remainder of the slides, and I look forward to hearing your questions afterwards.
Perfect. Thank you, Ingrid. Yeah, as mentioned, there's many links between the institute and the fund. Not only the name is this relate to each other, but we actually have really many joint events, and we tend not to think too much in silos, but we collaborate in many things. The same is true that we try to also reach out to the broader public or the broader group of stakeholders in Austria. And one of these events is Big X. It's a yearly flagship event where xista, the Institute of Science and Technology, Austria, and the Industriellen Vereinigung kind of jointly try to build a bridge between basic science and industry, basically. So we play the bridge of translation. And obviously, we are in the lead here. That happens every year, early fall, and brings together 200-300 people to discuss really how to invigorate that important topic of translation and tech transfer. We had people here from all kind of disciplines. Last year, we had Nir Shavit here, who was one of the founders, together with one of our professors for neural magic. We also had Michael Bronstein on stage, who came here from Oxford, and he's now running then the Ethera Institute, where AI meets biology. So these events are also a meeting ground for important people that play a role in Vienna and the Austrian landscape. So that's an important thing that we do. Next slide, please. Ingrid also mentioned those specialized training programs. We start with XBio because we figured that, for one, they are important and necessary to bring scientists that do what they do extremely well, but they don't have usually the necessary tool sets and network to become entrepreneurs. We started with biology and life science because that's an area where we see a lot of potential in Vienna and in Austria in general. And that became kind of a flagship for hopefully more initiatives like that. We started with just a few universities. In the meantime, we go into the third year, and we have all the Viennese important institutions on board, and some more are added as we speak. And the program basically has the idea to equip the people that join, usually it's around 20, with the necessary basic tools to understand how to set up a company, how to run a company in the early stage. So we teach them about some legal basics, about preclinical development, about IP, and so on and so on. But importantly, we also give them a set of mentors side by side. So people that have done it before, industry veterans, that help them to develop their ideas in how to turn their scientific results into a business, into a startup, so that when they leave the program, they also have a rudimentary basic network of all the functions they need to get started. So that goes in the third year. We have first startups that have been created by alumni, and we see that really taking effect and increasingly creating buzz. Triggered by the success of that program, the University of Vienna actually picked up the idea and did something very similar around quantum tech. We second the University of Vienna in that case, so the Uni Innsbruck is part of it, the ÖAW, and we created a similar program around physics, because also there we have really strength in Austria, and that goes on, and we hope that others will follow the example. Next one, please. Yeah, and that brings us to the core of the next topic, and that is really, where does the money come from to actually fuel those spin-offs? Because we know we have ideas, we have infrastructure, we have people, but there is one important part that was really missing until very recently in Austria, and is still not sufficiently there. That's money. And not just any money, but smart money and patient money that supports founders from the beginning on. And that was the idea for xista Science Ventures, to bring together a team of people and the necessary money to help founders make the first steps and bring them from the very beginning to a Series A, Series B, where other bigger funds can ultimately take over. Next slide, please. So basically, we start very early. We have our first discussion sometimes even before a founder has the idea to start a company, or just starts to dwell with the thought. And we help them through several phases until a Series A. It means a serious investment round. That means, if you talk about more concrete numbers, next slide, please. We invest very early. That means these are usually checks in the range of 500,000. That is especially that sounds for somebody who still knows the American circumstances tiny, but it's actually a lot of money with which you can get quite something done in Austria. For one, we often syndicate, so the total money may be higher, can be up to 1 million. But the nice thing in Austria is you get a lot of non-dilutive public money that complements equity investment. So our experience is that with the first 1 million of equity investment, startups can reach additional 2 to 3 million of non-dilutive public grants or long-term loans. And with that, a lot of de-risking is possible. And with that, startups get quite a way. We follow up then with in second rounds with up to 1.5 million. And then for the most successful ones, we can again invest up to 4 million. So altogether, about 6 million is what we have in the books for our most successful companies. As mentioned, that's syndicated with others. So in total, much more money is flowing into those companies. What's also important is money is just one part of it. We are a quite active investor, but what we see is that that is necessary, required, and also requested in many cases when we don't try to impose ourselves. But we have built a significant team that has actually expertise in various areas that are quite helpful for the founders in the early stage companies. If we move on. Yeah, so we have assembled over the years 21 companies in the first fund. First fund implies that there is a second fund, yes. We just had a first closing of the second fund. We will continue to invest. And as you see, this is the same, is a framework that a little bit reflects what ISTA is doing. We have a number of different disciplines, but none of or few of our companies really fall in just one area. So we are, as a team, able to make investments and deals in companies that are not pure players, like pure drug development or pure physics companies, but we are willing and able to work with companies that play at the interface of certain disciplines. And that's very often where really interesting things happen. Thinking about Ribbon, for instance, that was mentioned by Ingrid before. And Ribbon started as an idea by Harold, who was a mathematician by training and did work around biology and evolution. And it is producing long chain DNA, like 10,000, 20,000, 30,000 base pairs. And that applies basically machine learning, good biology, chemistry, biochemistry, robotics to produce DNA that has been impossible to reach in the past or only via very lengthy cloning processes within hours to days. So that's something that others might not pick up, but we did, and it's making very nice progress. So in total, 21 companies. 17 of those are located in Austria, and 4 of them are international, so to say. We have made investments in France, in Paris, in Ljubljana, in Göteborg, and what was mentioned before, Cellgate in the US. So, and it also hints already a bit into the future. Our initial investments were all centered around Austria, but as we progress and grow, we see more and more interesting deal flow coming from other countries in our direction proactively, and obviously we picked it up happily. We can also show you some numbers. The first fund has reached a stage where we will not make any more initial investments, but only follow-on investments into the portfolio. The first fund has been 45 million, and out of that, about 24 have been invested. And what you see in the middle part of the chart is that, as mentioned before, a significant amount of grants flew into those companies. So 60 million we have been able to leverage from public sources, or the founders, I should better say. Austrian and European ones, European Innovation Council grants are there, AWS, FFG, and others. And then we were able to also motivate other investors to invest into those startups, so that in total, we are approaching 230, 250 million of money that flew into those 21 companies that we, to some extent, triggered actually and helped to get out there. So there is more to be done, but this is an important first step. And I mentioned first fund, second fund. We are raising a second one that will be significantly larger because we see the need for it and also the possibility to deploy that money and invest it purposefully into startups. So the second fund, we are aiming for 75 million, maybe even a bit more. And we had a first closing just end of last year, so we can continuously continue to invest in new startups and help them to actually get the money to translate their ideas into companies. And also with the returns that we show so far, we are actually doing quite well. So within the portfolio of the European Investment Fund, who is our biggest investor, we are by far in the first quartile of their portfolio, so we're doing pretty well. All that, of course, needs to be driven by people. You see here the current team of xista, so that's not only the people that work in the fund, but also those that work in innovation. That gives you an idea about the size, but also about the kind of expertise and experience the team brings. We are very happy with the kind of people we're able to combine and win for our team. It's quite international. Ingrid is not from Austria, as you may have recognized by her perfect English and expression. We have people from all kinds of countries, and everybody, or many of us, have actually a dual expertise by their education or CV. So many people have kind of a scientific, technical background that's complemented by either an MBA or consulting experience. So we can effectively help the founders to bridge that gap from, as mentioned, from the lab, from the science to the business. And the team keeps growing. So we have more people joining in tech transfer, in communications. We also have an add out. We are looking to fill another role as a principal in topics related to physics, in industrial applications, climate change. So if that's of interest to you, that job ad is on our website, and more positions will come online as the team is growing. So that was briefly about what we are doing. We try to be the catalyst and the fuel at the same time for founders that want to get something done. And I think there is a rich opportunity. And we had cases where people thought about founding their companies outside of Austria, people that were in the US, for instance. And we are about to sign one deal that falls into that category. And then realized, well, Boston is great, but Vienna isn't that bad either. It's way cheaper. The people that you hire will not run away as quickly as in other areas where there's a lot of competition for talent. You get money easily that you need to fill your needs. And so Vienna is a good place to start something. And people underestimate sometimes what a great breeding ground Vienna can be for startups. So if you want to get involved in any way in the activities of xista, as mentioned, this is open. This is not a closed thing, but we try to reach out. There's a couple of things in here. We just listed a few ideas. So XBio, we're always looking for new people to be there as members and go and be part of the course, as students, so to say. We're looking for people who are willing to mentor our participants. We're looking for people that provide access to the network when it comes to expertise, when it comes to access to companies. So we are very open for that. We are always looking, we are providing something that's called xista Talks, where we invite former scientists that became entrepreneurs to tell their story to the community. So if you're interested to tell your story, your life story, your professional story, please reach out. We are happy to to consider that. You could join the ISTA faculty if you want to come back from the US and find an excellent place to work in the natural sciences. You can obviously also become an investor in the second fund. So these are just a few points you could do. We are always open and looking for expanding our reach, our network, and trying to help everybody. So it's a give and take. And I hope to, well, you take something away from that talk, that we are as a team collectively part of an interesting and fantastic ecosystem that's in the make. I think there are not so many places in Europe where such a dynamic has been unleashed in a way. We see that also by the kind of people that visit, that come here to give talks. These are Nobel laureates. These are people with Turing Prize awards, but also politicians and international delegations. Von der Leyen visited us last year. So that is making noise, and the more people join and lean in and get involved, the better it is. But with that, I would like also to stop talking, and we are both avoiding your comments, questions, and involvement in any way.
Well, thank you so much, Ingrid and Alexander. Are there any questions? I can't see anything. Maybe you want to pose your questions in the chat. Christine.
Hi, everybody. Thanks for the great talk. It's good to see how successful this has been. I was at the ISTA meeting in probably 2005 or 6 in New York before it all started. And it's really, I think, a success story that after so many years, you could really make it what the vision was. My question is, like you mentioned that people from Cambridge came here and because it's a nicer place. But how do you really compete with a place like Boston where everything is? And it's from personal experience, like everything moves there, even once it was in Austria. And what's your exit strategy, or what's your end point kind of? Because there are several startups that are successful for a few years, but to really make it over that finishing line to become a product. So do you have any special criteria you look at, or do you really focus only on that first part?
Well, these are many questions in one in one go. I mean, how can we compete? What we see is that we can compete with many places because we have lots of talent here, and the money is there, the infrastructure is there. If we compare the funding rounds with the US, we sometimes forgot that the cost structures are very different. So a 10 million round in the Bay Area doesn't get you anywhere. But with a 10 million here, you get a long way. So we need to calibrate those numbers always a little bit. So that's important to see. Obviously, if you want to compete on a global market, at the end, you need to have a global mindset. It means, for instance, when we bring in new money, new investors, we always encourage the founders to not become the first and the best in Vienna, but international. It means you need to have partnerships across the world. You need investors with a long reach, and that actually works. I mean, you may have seen or not Prewave. Prewave is a company that was spun out of TU Wien. 2 people that did their PhD there. In the meantime, they have the last round that was published. The financing was about 65 million euros. And of course, that was not Austrian funded. These were international funds that saw the potential, invested there, and the team is still here. The team is growing, they're expanding in other countries, but it actually works. And we recognized them from the beginning and supported them. It's important to get the right kind of talent on board. At some point, you need to get the right government structures, the right kind of board members, and integrate them into that global pool of talent, essentially, and expertise. And so far, we could all hold them actually in Austria. And the case of Solgate is maybe also a good example to bring up here. I mean, that happened because one of their recent investors is Curie Bio, which is a US biotech fund, and not just anyone, but a very interesting and an excellent one. And there we found a structure where the team, the majority of the work still happens in Vienna, actually on campus here in the Science Park. But specific parts and assets have been translated, spun out in a separate company where they now can tap into the US ecosystem with CROs and expertise, also the capital markets, but still the vast majority of people expertise remains in Austria. So there are ways of doing that actually. And I would assume that in many other cases, at some point, we will have US entities on top. In some cases, we'll also need to transfer them possibly. But for now, we didn't have any problem to actually make progress, even though they're just in Austria. And Austria is getting on the map increasingly.
Just to add briefly to that, I mean, our startup teams are incredibly international. I mean, we have a running joke that every one of our startups has to have at least one Italian, but I mean, the Italians are just the tip of the iceberg. We've got people from all over the world, reflecting also the body of people working at ISTA as well. But we've even seen that these small startups are recruiting people from other continents and other countries all the time, and they want to come to Vienna. I guess it's a combination of the lifestyle and the science and the excitement around the startup. So far, it's looking good. And, you know, as Alex referred to, it's not our intention to stop these companies growing and internationalizing, not at all. But right now, I think getting incubated in our ecosystem has its certain advantages.
Are there other questions?
Maybe I pose a question towards in the audience. Is there anybody here who is thinking about starting a company whom we might be able to interact and help?
Johannes, another one.
I can talk, but if anybody in the audience wants to take the question.
I would love to start one. I just missed the idea. That's what I feel. I would be totally in for that.
Yeah, I mean, I can say that we have been working on this idea of doing a medtech company for the last couple of years, combining iontronic chemistry, meaning ion pumps, and bioorthogonal chemistry to create an implant that is capable of turning on and off drug delivery. And this is sort of what brought me back also to Vienna. In that sense, yes, we are very interested. I have not had any experience with Austrian VCs. There are two Swedish VCs that invested in a company where I was CEO, and then a Finnish VC joined later. So it's very the insights I got from there compared to the other Austrian company that was started as a spin-off from the AIT, Austrian Institute of Technology, was really like in a different world. In Austria, it took us 2 years to get that. Then we had the AWS pre-seed, which is nice, but very, very slow. And in Sweden, we had 2 or 3 interviews, and then the VCs said, you know what, that's fine. We're gonna invest. We need to kink out the details. That took about a month, maybe a month and a half, and then the final pitch was followed by a handshake. And after that handshake, 4 weeks afterwards, we had the money in the bank account. And then we had similar discussions with trying to do this in Austria, and it's just painful. Maybe it's because the companies are different, but also sort of you touched upon this topic of the availability of venture capital in Europe and in Austria. I mean, I glanced through this Draghi report that came out a couple of months ago, and the number one thing hampering innovation in Europe is actually the availability to venture capital. So what is maybe my question to you is sort of what is your European network? You mentioned the EIC, which is fantastic, but if you apply for the EIC accelerator, for example, that is also, you have 3 to 6% success rate. So it's insane what Europe is doing to innovation.
I mean, first, let me react to your criticism of how long it takes. I think that was one of the reasons why we wanted to start our own fund, because we had numerous stories where founders were waiting to get investments and there were angels around and everybody was waiting for somebody else to take the first step and take the lead, and nothing's happened. And we decided we will do it differently. We will be the lead investor. We take the first step. We don't shy away. We make our opinion and we make the investment and fill the gap in that way. Network. Well, then you mentioned the EIC. I think the EIC was created with a very good intention to have an instrument in Europe that funds high risk, high reward things, a bit similar to DARPA maybe. We are still far away from that being really successful to that extent that was intended. Much has to be done. I hope that, things are developing and we are also getting involved and trying to share our experiences and observations with the EIC. But yeah, there Europe needs to become much better and much faster and bigger and so on. There's many things that need to be improved and changed. But our network obviously goes further. We know many of the funding agencies in Austria quite well. We know the few Austrian investors that there are, but we also have a quite rich network with non-Austrian funds. We need to have, because otherwise we would be limited to 3 or 4, and that wouldn't do the trick. We received funding by the European Innovation Fund, EIF, and Investment Fund, obviously. And they fund a huge amount of VCs in Europe. So some of our funds that we work with also received EIF funding. And so for that's also one level of network that we have. And then many other funds in our size and bigger ones that we work with. I mentioned that at the beginning, we only did Austrian spinoffs at the beginning in Austrian investments. And it was simply because we didn't see anything else, basically. That was our deal flow. That changed dramatically over the years as we worked. We received more and more proactive deal flow that came to us. That is simply a reflection of our network, and that people recognized our activities and now things are flowing into our direction. And now the international deal flow is at least equally big as the Austrian one. So and that hopefully answers some of your questions.
Are there any other questions?
Yeah, I would have one.
Yeah, please.
Yeah, hello. So my name is Catherine Spindler. I am with the X Prize Foundation. I don't know if you've heard about X Prize. So it's a nonprofit foundation, 30 years old. We're running incentivized competitions, more or less. And we are like trying to solve some audacious problems we have for big humanities impact. And pretty much our prices are worldwide, and they range from like $10 million to like $100 million. And part of the kind of ecosystem, we are like bringing the teams from inception through like having a solution to a problem, something we want them to more or less bring to market, and then let them go and share the solution and be successful. So what we're doing is we are crowdsourcing the solutions to very tough problems. It's deep tech, it's health care, there was like another one was, for example, carbon capture. We have a couple of active prizes right now. I'm leading the quantum applications prize at the moment, which is $5 million prize. And we always have a handful of Austrians in the competition. So I joined XPRIZE 8 months ago. I'm Austrian, obviously, that's why I'm here. So we always have a handful of Austrians that are in the competitions. We had a finalists for our Feed the Next Billion prize. Review Foods, they're an Austrian company, for example.
Yep.
So in any case, what I'm here for is more or less like introduce XPRIZE, say that, you know, you have an Austrian fellow in the foundation, and I would be happy to connect you to our ecosystem and then see like how you could plug in, if there are opportunities for you to plug in, because we pretty much need, you know, organizations like yours that invest in, you know, like these companies to move forward. And we would do some kind of like, part of the price is obviously kind of like testing their solution and making sure that they're up to bar to the goals we set. And typically our judges and advisors are, you know, the experts in that area of the prize. So just wanted to say great things to hear about what you're doing in Austria to push, you know, technology forward and help those that have these great ideas, and would love to plug in with you.
Super. Many
Yeah,
thanks for that.
Yeah, we'll connect then offline and see what we can brainstorm around. That would be great.
Yeah, that'd be
I
great.
see that Edmundo Sanchez is also here silently in the background. So he's part of the xista innovation team, and he was mentioned in relation to the quantum iLabs. So I think connecting with you could be very helpful.
Great. Yeah, thanks again for a great presentation today.
Yeah, one of our spin-offs, our startups, actually comes out of the Institute of Anton Zeilinger, so Philipp Walter's group. So we have links there. We do stuff there. Yeah.
Oh, exciting.
Excellent. Thanks.
Any last questions? Can you maybe share again just the contact information, or just put them in the chat so people can easily copy paste, or can you also provide your slides so we can distribute them later on?
Sure, I can send the slides to you and Alexandra for circulation.
Perfect. Thank you. I just had one other question. You mentioned sort of also this entrepreneurial school that you launched. Do you have any dates for that, or how does that typically work?
So the XBio course is starting again in the summer semester this year. So we're in the sort of, not final stages, but we're furiously working on preparing for the launch of the next cohort. So we'll be advertising, I think, in February, probably with a deadline somewhere towards mid or late March for the cohort to start punctually at the very beginning in April, when we have a kind of kickoff boot camp, and the course runs until late June. So we'll be sharing information about that on our channels. And, you know, especially Denise, if you could spread the word among ASTINA members in Austria who are here on the ground and ready to go, that would be great. But like we said, you know, if anybody wants to get more actively involved in XBio, even as a remote mentor, we would really love to have you on there, and we'll be happy to involve you. So please just reach out to us.
Maybe could you just explain what the mentor would be doing there exactly?
Yeah, maybe that's helpful. So just to be clear, this is not some, you know, huge commitment of time. What we envisage is that for each participant on the course, we'll assign probably at least 2 mentors who would dedicate an hour of their time to have a call or to meet with those people, just to share immediate reactions and brainstorm with them. And what we've seen is that most mentors actually voluntarily want to do more than that. And often a relationship builds up that persists beyond the end of the course, and has been very helpful to some of the people with more advanced ideas. But it's totally voluntary, and as we said, an hour commitment is already extremely valuable.
Okay. I just had one more idea that popped up, maybe for the audiences that intend to maybe come back from the US, because this affected me as well. I was not aware that there's something called Zuzugsfreibetrag. So this is for people who have been working abroad for at least 5 years. If you then come back to Austria, you get a 30% tax cut. I have no idea why this is not widely announced, because that's quite some incentive. But it's one thing that should be more more spread out, because this is the one thing that we also experience in terms of recruiting problems. If you can add a 30% tax bonus, it won't be Boston, it won't be New York, but it's Vienna plus. Yeah.
And it's also for your partner if he or she's international.
Can you say again?
This is also for if you come back to Austria and your partner is a non-European citizen, they are also eligible for this bonus.
Yeah.
It's actually a very nice incentive, but it's true, like really not many people know about, like there are a lot of hidden bonuses coming to Austria actually.
Yeah. I just put the link in the chat.
In
Okay.
general, if you think about coming back, or if you know somebody who wants to come back, we're more than happy to share our network and show them what opportunities we see in the sciences or in the entrepreneurial space. On our website, there's also a section about careers where we have at any point in time 30 to 50 open jobs from the portfolio. So maybe an interesting way to kind of link in for those that are coming back and are looking for interesting work to be done.
Can you also share this in the email or link or chat?
Let me see if I find it quickly.
But in general, even aside from that, if you're returning, or someone who's returning, and there's often a spousal issue where the other half is looking for a position. We've helped in quite a number of cases to find suitable, interesting jobs for those people. We do this routinely with ISTA because, as typically happens, you've got a very highly educated professor candidate who's coming with an equally highly educated spouse looking for something interesting, and not always in academic positions. So we'll do our best to share our network as well.
Great. Well, with that, we are right in time. Thank you so much for participating and taking interest. I wish you a very nice Friday evening or Friday morning, depending on where you are. See you.
Thanks very much.
Bye, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you.